Hi, I'm Amelia.
I was in the middle of closing a deal with a new client when my phone buzzed again. For missed calls from my mother. I ignored them. I'd learned the hard way that most of her calls weren't emergencies. They were guilt trips wrapped in passive-aggressive sighs. Still, a small part of me, the part that used to beg for her approval, hesitated. But only for a second. I tapped the screen off and turned my attention back to the contract in front of me. This was the kind of work I'd built from scratch alone. Every penny in my account, every connection I had, every late night in my apartment, lit by the blue glow of a laptop screen and fueled by microwave dinners, had brought me here. No help, no support, just grit. Because 4 years ago, my parents decided I didn't exist anymore. It started with a choice. My sister, Lauren, had dropped out of college for the third time, this time to focus on her creative journey, which, at the time, meant vlogging about morning routines and crystal energy. She needed money, my parents said.
Just a small loan.
But I watched as small became monthly allowances, new equipment, marketing services, brand consultation fees. I was in my last year of law school then, juggling a job at a legal clinic, internships, and my own tuition. When I asked for help with rent one month, just one time, I was told they couldn't afford to support 2 daughters. One of us had potential, they said. The other had dreams. That was the night I stopped calling them. What they didn't know was that I didn't just need the money, I needed the faith. I needed someone to say they believed in me, that the years of studying and sacrificing sleep, social life, and sanity meant something. Instead, they gave everything to Lauren and handed me silence. The final straw came 6 months later when I found out they had emptied a savings account that had been in my name since I was 16, the account I planned to use as a deposit for my first apartment post-graduation. I called them, shaking with fury. My mother didn't even deny it. She said it was for the family. Lauren needed to relocate to LA. The content scene was bigger there. They promised it would pay off. So, I stopped waiting for an apology. I graduated, passed the bar, and took the lowest-paying job at the most prestigious firm I could find, knowing the sacrifice would mean connections, prestige, and experience. I lived in a basement studio, skipped dinners, and wore the same 3 blazers to every meeting. And over time, I rose. I started my own firm 2 years later, small but sharp, focused on creative law, exactly the kind of work influencers needed but didn't understand until it was too late. I found my niche, and it found me back. Quietly, steadily, I became successful. And then Lauren showed up in my inbox. I saw her name and laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh, more of a dry chuckle, the kind you give when the punchline of an old joke finally lands. Subject: Hey sis, let's talk.
No puntuación.
Classic Lauren. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it for 3 hours while reviewing a copyright dispute for a client whose video had gone viral on TikTok. Finally, curiosity won. The email was short. Too short. She said she was in a transitional phase, that she was thinking of pivoting into something more sustainable, and had heard I was doing big things in legal circles. She wondered if we could meet. Maybe talk about a potential role.
She wanted to work with me. Just like that. No apology.
No acknowledgement of the years between us, of the betrayal, of the silence. Just a request, clean and casual, as if the past had been a bad connection easily redialed. I didn't respond.
Not that day.
Not the next. It took exactly 4 days for the first text to come from Mom. Did you get Lauren's email? She's really trying, you know. I ignored that too. Then came the voicemail. You're being unfair. Family means giving second chances. I laughed again. Funny how they always asked me to give, but never her. The truth was, Lauren's career had crashed. Quietly, like most influencer careers do. One too many sponsorship scandals, a few viral clips taken out of context, and then the slow bleeding of followers. The last time I looked, her page was full of desperate collabs with discount wellness brands and vague affirmations layered over muted sunset reels. She was fading. And now, I was the one with something to offer. But I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge or closure. Maybe both. Maybe neither. So I agreed to meet her. 1 coffee. Neutral location.
No promises.
When I walked into the cafe, she was already there, too put together for someone supposedly in transition. Designer bag, full face of makeup, the kind of outfit chosen not for comfort but for performance. She stood when she saw me, arms open like we'd just run into each other at a family barbecue. I didn't hug her. She talked first, fast and breathless, about her creative burnout, about how she realized she wanted something more grounded, more stable, and how proud she was of me. She said it all with the same voice she used on her videos, the one that always sounded like she was 2 seconds away from asking for likes and follows. I watched her talk and wondered if she even remembered what authenticity felt like. Finally, she asked, could I bring her in? Just a trial. She could help with outreach, social media, maybe branding. She had connections, she said. I had to stop myself from laughing again. Connections? The same ones who ghosted her the second she stopped being trending? I asked her what she knew about creative law. She blinked. Then she said she could learn. I told her that wasn't how this worked. My firm wasn't a playground, and I wasn't hiring interns based on family ties. She said she was serious, that she'd changed. She even said she'd go back to school, if that's what it took. And then she said something that made my blood run cold. Mom said you'd be like this. She said you'd hold a grudge forever. But I'm trying to fix this. I'm trying to be better. Why can't you? There it was. The twist of the knife. Not just asking for help, but framing my refusal as cruelty. The same old narrative. Lauren the wounded. Me the unforgiving. I stood up. Told her I'd think about it. I could see the panic flash behind her eyes. She knew she'd played the wrong card. But I didn't care. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't need her to understand what she'd done. I just needed her to know I hadn't forgotten. Back at the office, I pulled up her old content history. I knew her well enough to know she'd left a trail. Sponsorships that broke FTC rules, giveaways with no winners, paid endorsements for questionable health products. I wasn't looking for dirt. I was looking for leverage. Not to hurt her, but to protect myself. Because if I did let her in, I needed to know exactly what kind of risk I was inviting. What I found was worse than I expected. Deleted tweets full of problematic statements, DMs leaked in forums, even a Reddit thread titled, "Is Lauren H. a scam?" The more I read, the colder I felt. She hadn't just failed, she'd burned bridges behind her and was now looking for mine to cross. I closed the laptop and stared out the window. The city moved on below me, indifferent and loud. Somewhere out there, Lauren was probably posting a filtered story, telling the world she was exploring new opportunities. But I knew the truth. She wasn't exploring. She was cornered. And she wanted me to open the door. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't the same girl who once begged for scraps of approval. I had rebuilt myself brick by brick. And I wasn't about to let her take a sledgehammer to it. Not again. And yet, a part of me still hesitated. Not because I owed her, but because I wanted something. Not revenge. Not justice. Something quieter. I wanted her to admit it. That they chose her. That they abandoned me. That I survived without them. I wanted her to say it, to mean it. And maybe, just maybe, then I could finally let go. But Lauren never apologized. Not really. And she was about to learn that in my world, you don't get second chances without consequences. I didn't reply to Lauren's follow-up email, or her text, or the message she sent through LinkedIn pretending to be professional. I focused instead on preparing for the upcoming conference in Chicago, where I was scheduled to speak on a panel about digital rights and creative ownership. It was a big moment. Another one I wish someone in my family would acknowledge. But I already knew better. There were no congratulations coming from them. Not even curiosity. Only Lauren, knocking on the door she'd once helped shut. The day before the conference, my assistant poked her head into my office. "There's someone here asking for you. Says it's family." My stomach clenched before I even heard the name. "Lauren. She's not on your calendar. Want me to tell her you're out?" I hesitated.
Part of me wanted to.
The other part knew Lauren wouldn't show up in person unless something was wrong. Really wrong. She looked different this time. Less polished, like the edges of her carefully curated world were starting to fray. No makeup, hair tied back, wearing a hoodie and jeans that didn't fit her usual image. She didn't smile. Just stood in the hallway, eyes wide like she expected me to yell or slam a door. We sat in the small meeting room just off the reception area. I didn't offer coffee.
She didn't ask.
She pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Inside were resumes. Not just hers, but several, each showing a steady downward trajectory. Failed internships, canceled collaborations, gaps in employment. Then, at the very bottom, a note from a recruiter. Unqualified for current roles. Recommend additional education or certification. She said she'd been applying everywhere. No one wanted her. No one trusted her brand. Sponsors had cut ties. Even her own followers had turned on her. She said she was desperate. I asked her what she expected me to do. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't spill over. She said she didn't want pity. She just wanted a chance. I told her I didn't run a charity. She nodded. Then she said she'd figured out what Mom and Dad had done, that she'd seen bank records, that she knew now just how much they'd taken from me to fund her dream. Her voice broke then. She said she hadn't known, that she hadn't realized they'd drained my account, that she thought they were helping me too. And then she said it. They chose me. I know that now. I didn't ask for it, but I didn't say no either. And I let them turn you into the villain every time you tried to say no. I let them throw you away so I could keep being the golden child. The room went silent. I didn't know what I'd expected her to say, but it wasn't that. And yet, even as the words landed, some part of me stayed cautious. Because Lauren's strength had always been performance. I'd watched her cry on cue for years. But this time, it felt different. Or maybe I just wanted it to be. Still, I couldn't let her in. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I told her I was leaving for Chicago that night. That I'd think about her request. She thanked me, stood, and said she was staying with a friend. At least for now. Before she left, she asked one more thing. Could she borrow my name? Not my money. Not my connections. Just my name on her resume, to help her land something, anything. I told her I'd think about that too. The conference was a blur of handshakes, panels, and hotel lobbies. My speech went viral on LinkedIn. An industry blog quoted my closing line about protecting creators in a world where popularity can disappear overnight. I smiled when I saw it online. The irony wasn't lost on me. But then on the last night, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo of Lauren. Crying. Bruised. And behind her in the blurry background, a familiar kitchen. My parents' kitchen. The caption read, "She came home. We're fixing things. But she's unstable." My blood went cold. It was from my father. It took 3 more messages for me to understand. Lauren had gone home. They'd let her in. But something had happened. A fight. A screaming match. And now Mom was saying Lauren had a problem. That she was becoming a threat. That they didn't know what to do. They were asking me to come home. I hadn't been back in 4 years. Not even for holidays. But the weight of that message settled over me like a stone. Because despite everything, despite the betrayal, they were still my family. And Lauren, even if I couldn't trust her, I didn't want her hurt. I flew home the next morning. The house looked smaller. Not in size, but in presence. Like time had drained its power. Mom opened the door with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad hovered behind her, quiet as always. And then I saw Lauren, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, eyes red but dry. She didn't look at me. They said she'd been having mood swings. That she'd accused them of things they hadn't done. That she'd started shouting about money, about being used, about lies. Mom looked at me like she expected me to confirm the story. Instead, I asked to speak to Lauren alone. When the room cleared, she looked at me. Really looked. Then she handed me her phone. There were voice memos. Recordings. Of arguments. Of Mom and Dad admitting they'd covered for her, even forged documents in her name. Of them laughing about how easy it had been to shut me out. One recording stood out. Mom saying, "She's too busy chasing courtrooms to notice. We've emptied the account." Besides, what's she gonna do? Sue her own family? I stared at the screen. Lauren said she'd started recording them after she overheard them talking about her again, like a project, a lost cause, not a daughter. She said she knew now she was just a tool, that we both were. I didn't speak.
I just took the phone and left.
Back in the city, I called Emerson, my friend and legal partner. We went over the recordings. She said what I was thinking. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was fraud. And if the money trail led where I thought it did, it could mean serious legal consequences. I filed the paperwork. Not to punish them. Not exactly. But to reclaim what was mine. A week later, a process server delivered the notice. My parents tried to call. I didn't answer. I was done listening to them talk. I wanted to hear a judge instead. Lauren moved into a women's support housing unit. She got a job as a barista. Small steps. Real ones. She didn't ask me for anything else. Until the morning I found a manila envelope on my office desk. Inside was a letter. From my father. He said he was sorry. That he hadn't realized the extent of what they'd done until the recording surfaced. That he was tired of watching the people he loved destroy each other. He said he was leaving.
Divorcing mom.
Starting over. And that he wanted to testify. I took the letter to Emerson. We added it to the case file. Later that week, I received a call from a recruiter. A firm wanted to partner with mine. Said they'd seen my speech. That they admired my integrity. I said I'd think about it. Because the past was still unfolding. And the biggest twist? Lauren never applied for a job at my firm again. She started one of her own. Helping other creators recover from exploitation and mismanagement. And this time, she didn't need my name. Not even once. 2 weeks after the papers were served, the silence was louder than anything I'd heard in years. No more calls.
No angry voicemails. No guilt-classed texts.
Just space. Empty, stretching space. And in that space, something shifted. Not peace exactly, but something steadier. A strange kind of strength that came from no longer hoping to be understood. I kept working. I kept building. Clients came in waves, my reputation growing with every win. I hired 2 new associates. The firm expanded. Emerson and I joked that maybe it was time to get an actual office with more than one window and chairs that didn't squeak. But under the laughter, I could feel the pressure mounting. The lawsuit was gaining traction. We had bank records, voice recordings, sworn testimony from my father, and now, even a forensic accountant's preliminary report. The numbers were staggering. Nearly $500,000 siphoned over the course of 4 years. Not just from my trust fund, but from tax evasion, loan fraud, and shell accounts linked to my parents' names. It was bigger than me now. One morning, I came into the office to find Emerson already there, pacing. She looked up and said a single sentence that knocked the air out of me. "They're trying to countersue you." I blinked. For what? She handed me the papers. Defamation. Emotional distress. Attempted character assassination. It was surreal reading those words. My parents, the people who once told me I was ungrateful for asking for help with rent, were now accusing me of destroying their lives. But they weren't just making noise. They had hired a real lawyer. A good one. The kind who specialized in high-profile family disputes. Someone who would drag everything into the light. My emails, my financials, even the therapy notes I'd once confided to an insurance-covered counselor when I was barely surviving law school. I sat in my office that night long after everyone else had gone home. The city outside was calm, but I wasn't. Part of me wanted to drop everything, disappear, leave the past to rot where it belonged. But another part, the stronger one, refused to bend. I hadn't come this far to be intimidated now. So I prepared. Depositions began. They were brutal. My mother wept through hers, blaming the financial irregularities on poor memory and bad bookkeeping. She insisted the money had gone toward family needs, not selfish spending. But the paper trail disagreed. Vacations listed as business expenses. Gifts purchased with my account. Luxury items bought and shipped while I was eating instant noodles for dinner during internships. My father sat through his deposition quietly, only speaking when asked. His eyes didn't meet mine once. Lauren's testimony was scheduled next. When she walked into the conference room, even the opposing lawyer paused. She looked different. Older. Not in years, but in weight. The kind that settles on your shoulders when you finally stop pretending. She answered every question with clarity. She admitted to signing forms she hadn't read, to accepting money without asking where it came from. But she also told the truth about what our parents said behind closed doors, about how they'd manipulated us both. Her voice didn't shake once. Afterward, we walked outside together. For a long moment, we didn't say anything. Then she told me she'd been offered a job. Not through me. Not through anyone we knew. Just an internship at a nonprofit that helped women transition out of online abuse cycles and into tech education programs. She said she'd accepted. I told her I was proud of her. I meant it. A week later, a new twist unraveled everything again. Emerson burst into my office holding a brown envelope. No return address. Inside were photocopies of new financial documents, offshore accounts, an LLC in the Cayman Islands, a paper trail linking a luxury condo in New York, one I'd never seen, with my trust fund ID. At first, we thought it was fake. Then the signatures matched. The addresses matched. And the final page was a wire transfer, $75,000, to a name I hadn't seen in years.
Eric.
My ex. Lauren's ex too. The man who left me during law school after telling me I was too intense, who resurfaced briefly to flirt with Lauren in the wake of her influencer spiral, and who now, it seemed, had been given a payout. From my money. I didn't even feel shocked. Just tired. Tired of peeling back layers of betrayal and finding more rot underneath. Emerson tracked him down. He was in Florida, working for a crypto startup. The kind that was one tweet away from collapse. We sent a subpoena. At his deposition, he claimed ignorance. He said the money was a gift from my mother. Said he'd helped with some branding advice for Lauren, nothing more. But the bank logs showed otherwise. There had been multiple payments. Over years. And a note on one of the transfers read, "Thanks for keeping her out of our hair." I left the room. I couldn't listen to another lie told in a calm voice. Emerson stayed. She said later that Eric had folded halfway through the questioning, offered to return the money if we didn't pursue criminal charges. I told her I wanted to think about it, but we both knew what I'd decide. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for truth. So we didn't settle. That night, I went back to the house I hadn't visited in over a decade. My childhood home. The front lawn looked the same, but the paint was peeling. The lights were off. A for sale sign leaned in the front yard, barely holding itself up. I didn't go in. I just stood there. The next week, the judge made a preliminary ruling. The countersuit was dismissed. The evidence was too strong. The accounts too clear. My parents were ordered to pay restitution. Their assets were frozen. The condo was seized. Eric's accounts were flagged. There would be criminal proceedings next. After court, Lauren waited outside. She handed me a ring. A small silver band I hadn't seen since we were kids. I asked where she'd found it. She said it had been in Mom's jewelry box all along. My grandmother's ring. The one I was told had been lost. I slipped it on. It didn't fit like it used to. Lauren smiled. Said maybe we could start again someday. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. A week later, I stood in my office, watching the sun rise over the city. My phone buzzed. A new email. From a girl named Maya. She was a young law student, unsure of herself, asking for a chance. Said she'd read about me online. Said she didn't have much, but she had drive. Something about her words reminded me of a version of myself long buried under silence and resilience. I replied. Told her to come in Monday for an interview. And just like that, I closed one chapter. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. The Monday morning air felt different. Sharper. Colder. Or maybe it was just me. Maya sat across from me in the small glass meeting room, hands folded neatly, voice steady as she explained how she'd grown up on scholarships, how she was the first in her family to make it through college, how she worked nights at a restaurant just to afford prep books. Something about her reminded me of the girl I used to be, the one who didn't yet know how cruel family could be, who still believed talent and effort would be enough. I offered her the internship. Later that afternoon, Emerson stepped into my office with a look I recognized immediately. Something was wrong. Again. She dropped a printed email onto my desk. It was anonymous.
Sent through a throwaway account.
But the contents hit like a truck. Screenshots. Dozens of them. Emails between my mother and someone named Claudia. I didn't recognize the name at first. But Emerson did. Claudia was a former accountant from a boutique firm in New York. She had worked with our family once, briefly, to set up wealth optimization plans. The screenshots showed her expressing concerns, asking questions about fund transfers, about loan repayments with no paper trail, about discrepancies between declared assets and actual withdrawals. Mom's replies were curt, dismissive. And then came the most chilling one. Let me worry about Olivia. She doesn't need to know what's hers.
Not yet.
My chest tightened. The email went on to reveal something neither Emerson nor I had uncovered. Another account, one in my name, opened when I was 17, with a forged signature and no listed beneficiary. A slush fund.
Hidden.
Tapped into repeatedly, over years. And the final document was a ledger showing that account had been drained completely. The total loss, $112,000. More than money. More than betrayal. This was deliberate theft under my name, conducted while I was a minor. Emerson's face was pale. She said this changed everything. This wasn't just civil fraud anymore. It was criminal embezzlement, wire fraud, financial identity theft. We'd already filed a lawsuit, but now we had enough to escalate it to federal court. I signed the paperwork. The news broke 2 days later. First in legal blogs, then in local newspapers, then, somehow, on a national morning show. They called it the quiet implosion of a picture-perfect family. They showed pictures of my parents at charity events, Lauren's old influencer photos, side-by-sides of me now as a successful legal entrepreneur. The public loved it. Betrayal, money, redemption. It was the perfect storm. And while part of me hated the exposure, another part felt oddly vindicated. The story had always existed. But now people believed it. But the attention brought something else I hadn't expected. A letter. Mailed to the office. No return address. Just my name in sharp, cursive handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photo. The paper was a confession. Written by my father. He admitted to forging my signature on several documents. He said my mother pressured him. Said he hated himself for doing it. Said he didn't know how to make it right. The photo attached was a snapshot of a storage unit key, Unit 37B at a facility 2 towns over. Emerson and I went that evening. The clerk recognized my name right away. Said the unit had been opened on and off for over a decade. But the rent had stopped being paid 6 months ago. The manager was about to auction it. I showed ID. Proved ownership. They let us in. Inside was a time capsule. Boxes labeled Olivia. School awards. Certificates. College acceptance letters. Cards from my grandmother. Journals I thought I'd lost. Even my old laptop. At the back of the unit, wrapped in cloth, was a canvas. A painting I'd done in high school, something I remembered vividly because Mom had thrown it out, calling it childish. And yet here it was. Preserved. Hidden. Protected. There was also a metal lockbox. Inside, bank documents, signed affidavits, a will. Not my grandmother's. My aunt's. I hadn't known she left anything behind. She died in a car accident when I was 16. The will stated she'd left me $25,000 in a trust for Olivia when she turns 18. But I never received a dime. The money had vanished. The dates matched the first withdrawals from the hidden slush account.
They stole even that.
It was rage this time. Not sadness. Not grief. Just clean, white rage. Emerson told me to breathe. Said we'd press charges. Said we could add 2 more counts of theft, and one of probate fraud. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Quiet. Focused.
Cold.
Lauren called later that night. She said she saw the news. Said Mom was spiraling. That Dad had left town. That people were showing up at the house with cameras. I asked her what she wanted. She said nothing.
Just that she was sorry.
Again. And that if I wanted her to testify again, she would. The next day, my mother showed up at my office. Security called ahead. Said a woman was downstairs demanding to speak to me. She'd used my full name. My maiden name. She never used it. Not even when I was little. I told them to let her up. She entered like a woman deflated. Smaller somehow. Makeup smudged, lips pressed tight.
She didn't sit.
She stood across from my desk and looked around the office. Said it was nice. Said she was proud. Then she pulled out a document and placed it in front of me. It was a confession. Not legal. Just handwritten. She said she'd sign it, if that's what I wanted. She said she'd admit to everything. All of it. The accounts. The signatures. The theft. The lies. She just wanted one thing. She wanted me to call off the federal charges. I stared at her, wondering if she had any idea what she was asking. Not because it was too much, but because it was too late. I told her I couldn't. That it wasn't up to me anymore. That this had gone beyond us. She said she understood. Then she did something that made my breath catch.
She cried.
Not the rehearsed tears she used in court. Not the weaponized weeping from old fights. This time she cried like someone who had finally run out of masks. She said she missed me. That she hated herself. That everything she did was because she didn't know how to love without control. That watching Lauren fall apart had scared her. But watching me rise without her, that broke her. And still, I said nothing. Because what do you say to someone who taught you that love is conditional? That trust has a cost? That survival means staying silent? She left without waiting for a reply. Later that night, I found myself holding the painting from the storage unit. The one I thought was gone. I remembered what it felt like to paint that free, messy, honest. Before law. Before lies. Before family became something I had to fight to survive. I hung it in my office, above my desk, and I waited, because the final court hearing was coming. And the last move was mine. The courthouse was crowded that morning. Journalists lined the steps outside, their cameras poised, mics raised like weapons waiting for sound bites. I ignored them, walked past with my coat tight around me, Emerson by my side, Maya trailing behind carrying files, looking both terrified and inspired. We entered the courtroom quietly.
No fanfare.
No grand entrance. Just the quiet click of my heels on tile floors I used to dream of standing on, back when I thought winning an argument meant someone loved you enough to listen. My mother sat at the defendant's table, a worn shawl over her shoulders, her posture tight. Her lawyer whispered something into her ear, but she didn't react. My father wasn't beside her. He had recused himself from the courtroom, cooperating witness status. A plea deal was already in motion for his part in the crimes. He'd served probation, community service, a frozen retirement account. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't justice either. The judge entered. Gavel struck. And it began. The prosecution read the charges slowly. Wire fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, probate fraud. Over $500,000 tracked, documented, and verified. And beyond the money there was intent, deliberate concealment, systematic manipulation. The court didn't need to prove my pain. It only needed to see the paper trail. When it was our turn, Emerson spoke.
Calm.
Sharp. Surgical. She presented every piece of evidence we'd gathered. Every ledger. Every screenshot. Every forged signature. And then, in a twist no one expected, she played a short video clip we'd obtained just 2 days before. A hidden camera recording from the storage unit, installed legally after a tip from the manager. The footage showed my mother returning to the unit weeks before we'd discovered it. She had tried to remove files, had paused, looked around, and ultimately left empty-handed. It wasn't just guilt. It was fear. It was knowledge. proof that she knew what she was doing and what she'd done. The defense scrambled, claimed mental distress, said she hadn't been well for years. They introduced a last-minute psychological evaluation, trying to pivot the case into a plea for leniency. Said she was overwhelmed by family pressure, that she never intended for it to get this far. I didn't speak during the hearing. I hadn't planned to. But as the judge prepared for closing arguments, she asked if I had anything to say. She said victims often regret silence more than they regret speaking. So I stood. I walked to the center of the room, faced the judge, and then turned slightly to face my mother. I said I wasn't here for revenge. I said I wasn't even sure I was here for justice. What I wanted was truth. I told them that losing money wasn't the worst part. It was being made to believe I didn't deserve anything to begin with. It was watching my family invest in my sister's dreams while burying mine. It was waking up in a basement apartment knowing they thought I'd fail and that they wanted me to. I said the most painful part wasn't what they stole. It was what they never gave. Belief. I finished.
Sat down.
And for a moment, the courtroom was utterly still. Then the judge spoke. She called the case tragic. Called it an abuse of trust at the most intimate level. Said financial crimes inside families were often the most corrosive because they rewrote history. They made victims question their memories, their worth, their reality. And then she read the sentence. 3 years. Not decades. But not nothing. Enough to matter. Probation after that. Counseling. Mandatory restitution. Full public apology, submitted to court records. My mother didn't cry. She just nodded. And when they let her out in cuffs, she didn't look back. Outside, the reporters rushed me. Flashes. Questions.
Demands.
I said nothing. Just kept walking until I reached the car. Emerson climbed in beside me, silent. Then she handed me an envelope. It was from the bank. Final restitution transfer confirmed. The trust fund was officially closed. What was left had been returned to me. Not everything, but enough. Weeks passed. Lauren continued her work at the nonprofit. Quiet, steady, unseen. She didn't post anymore. Not even personal updates. She called once. Left a voicemail. Said she hoped I was doing okay. That she was trying every day to be different. I never called back. But I saved the message. Maya finished her internship. I offered her a full-time position. She cried when I told her. Said no one had ever believed in her like that. And for a moment, I remembered myself at her age. I told her she didn't owe me anything. Just to do the same one day for someone else. The firm grew. We moved into a bigger office. Clients kept coming. New ones, old ones, all kinds. And every time I walked into that space, I saw my painting hanging there.
Bright.
Messy. Unapologetic. One evening, as I locked up, a small package arrived. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was my grandmother's locket. The one I was told was too fragile to give me as a child. I opened it, and inside was a photo of her. And a folded note. I always knew you'd come out on top. I just hoped they wouldn't make you bleed to prove it.
No signature.
But I knew who sent it. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I wasn't bleeding anymore. The final twist wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. I won. Not in court. Not with money. But because I built something they couldn't destroy.
My peace.
My name. My future. They cut me off. But I learned to grow without them. And when they came back, needing what I'd built, I didn't let them take it. I protected it. I protected me. And that was the real ending. Not a courtroom gavel. Not a tearful apology. But a quiet, unshakable truth. I never needed them to believe in me. I just needed to believe in myself. And now I did.